How do scholars classify Greek New Testament manuscripts? Well, there's a couple of different organizations, and one of them is very simple and straightforward, but it's not the primary way in which they're classified. We'll address this first. You could classify these manuscripts by the material that they're written on. And in that case, there are three kinds of manuscripts. There are those that are written on papyri, which is an ancient substance kind of like paper, and we have a lesson on what the papyri were all about that you can watch a video on that. Secondly are those that are written on parchment or animal skins. And third are those that are written on paper. The later manuscripts tend to be written on paper. Those are the three materials and how manuscripts can be written. And this is not just Greek manuscripts, but all other manuscripts. Now, the way that Greek New Testament manuscripts are classified, though, is a fourfold classification that is partially content, partially material, and partially handwriting. It's a hodgepodge kind of an approach, but it has served scholars well for decades, even centuries, and I don't think it's going to be changed anytime soon. The four groups are papyri, uncials or majuscules, then minuscules, and lectionaries. Papyri are manuscripts that, as their name implied, are written on the material papyri or papyrus. And these manuscripts are, generally speaking, our very oldest manuscripts of the New Testament, and they are the fewest in number. We have approximately 125 papyri known to exist today of the New Testament. And they are numbered with a capital P and then the number in sequence. So 1 through 125 is what we have essentially today. The next group of manuscripts are the uncials or majuscules, and these are manuscripts that are written with capital letters. That's what uncial or majuscule means. But all of them, by definition, are written on parchment. And also, by definition, they are continuous text manuscripts. That is, they have a whole book in its normal chapters in its normal order. The other kinds of manuscripts are lectionaries that don't have a whole book organized. They'll have snippets from a book. For the example, they'll have 15 or 20 verses that are to be read out loud for that day, and then they'll skip over to another section. So you might have a Gospels lectionary that quotes from Mark, and then it might quote from John next, and then Luke, and then back to Mark, and then Matthew, this kind of a thing. But continuous text manuscripts are all the others except lectionaries. So an uncial or a majuscule manuscript means it's written on parchment, it's continuous text, and it's capital letters. And those manuscripts are designated in one of two ways, either by letters or by numbers that start with the number 0 every time. Now, if it's by letters, we start with the Latin alphabet, and so we don't have J, but we go through and have the rest of the letters. And then after that, we have the Greek alphabet for those manuscripts where the Greek letter is not identical to a form in the Latin alphabet. So you can't have a codex zeta because we already have the letter Z. You can't have a codex eta, which looks like a capital H, because we already have a manuscript H. So you have the Latin alphabet followed by the Greek alphabet, and these manuscripts take us through the first few dozen, and then we peel off into the numbered manuscripts only. All of those manuscripts that have a Latin or a Greek letter also have a number. And so Codex Vaticanus is also known as Codex B, and it's also known as Codex 03. We have other manuscripts. Codex N is also known as 022. Now, there's one manuscript that has a different alphabet that it follows, and that's the very first one in the list. It's known as Codex Sinaiticus. This is a 4th century manuscript that Constantine von Tischendorf, a German textual critic in the middle of the 1800s, discovered at St. Catherine's Monastery at Mount Sinai, at the base of Mount Sinai in Egypt. And in 1859, he brought that out of the monastery, and we'll talk about that at some point, about why he took that out, whether the monks really allowed him to do so or not. But the point here is that he was so excited about that manuscript that he gave it a new designation to give it priority to over the others, and he gave it the Hebrew letter Aleph. So it would stand at the front of the list of all these manuscripts. It's very similar to what we see in the yellow pages when somebody says triple A pest control. And then somebody else says, well, I want to be the first one who's noticed, so I'll have 5A pest control. It's just a matter of giving it priority by alphabetization, and consequently Tischendorf got to have his manuscript, a very important manuscript, listed first among all the others. That's Uncials, Majuscules, Greek letters, Latin letters, or in one case Hebrew letter, and all of them also have a numerical designation that starts with 0. We have over 300 Majuscule manuscripts today. The third category are those that are Minuscules, and these also have to do with handwriting, and that's why they're described as Minuscules. They are written on parchment or they are on paper. Now, these Minuscule manuscripts are almost always later than the Majuscule manuscripts, and the basic difference is that the Majuscules are capital letter manuscripts, Minuscules are cursive hand, but they're later. The earliest Minuscule manuscript we have is from the 9th century, and it goes all the way up to the 18th century for the few stragglers we have at the very end that are still written by hand after the time of the printing press and are apparently not copies of a printed Greek New Testament. We have over 2,900 manuscripts that have a Minuscule number to them right now. These are continuous text manuscripts, and they start with number 1 all the way to 2,905, I think is the latest number we have on these manuscripts now. Again, they start from the 9th century to about the 18th. The Majuscules go as early as the 3rd century and as late as about the 10th. And then finally, the last category are lectionaries. Lectionaries can be written on parchment, or they can be written on paper. And a lectionary also, which is very unusual, can be either minuscule text or majuscule text. It's unusual in the sense that it could be almost anything, but the thing that categorizes it a lectionary is not the material that it's written on, not the kind of letters that are used, but is it a continuous text manuscript or something else? The lectionary is something else. It's the kind of text that has passages that are read for a particular day of the week or a particular Saturday or Sunday lesson, and the ancient church began to have the practice of reading various passages of Scripture on certain holy days, certain Saturdays, certain Sundays, and this became the lectionary system that involves a couple of thousand of manuscripts. The oldest lectionary we have goes all the way back to the 5th century, and they go as late as the 17th or 18th century as well, just like the Minuscules do. Altogether, we have almost 5,800 numbered Greek New Testament manuscripts that exist today, and they are broken into these 4 categories: papyri, majuscules, minuscules, and lectionaries.